So I've changed the way I do my process of feeding my starter and that. So I'm just gonna show you my routine. I have my starter that's pretty active here. I've been putting it in a bread proofer, but you can also put it in the oven with the oven light on when it's winter time to make it go a little bit quicker. So the important thing about sourdough bread is the temperature, your starter and all that, all these variables play in. So I'm gonna tell you exactly what I use. I use whole wheat groats, and I use sometimes hard red wheat and sometimes wheat berries, like these gold ones, and I grind them. It's not that big of a deal. I know it sounds like more work than it actually is. I literally dump them into a thing and turn on a switch. And then I store it in a container like this. And this is what I use to feed my sourdough. And so what I do is I have 2 containers and I'm gonna make 2 loaves. And so I put it on the scale and I zero it out. And then I take 30 grams of my starter, and sometimes I go a little bit over, a little bit under. And then I zero it out again and I do 50 of filtered water. I like to use filtered water at room temperature, so I have to pour slowly. And then I use the remaining 50 of this flour. Okay, now I go ahead and I do my other one. And now I go ahead and I am going to feed my starter. So I start with a clean jar, and I like these jars that have the seal on them. And in order to feed it, I've just been putting about 15 to 20 grams of starter, which might be all I have left, so I might not have any discard. Okay, so I do 15 of the starter, and then I'm gonna do 30 of water and flour. If you put equal parts, it'll break down faster. When you do it this way, it takes a little bit longer, and since I don't use it for about 24 hours, that's why I use these ratios. And if I wanna speed it up, I can make it equal parts, or I can also add heat to it slightly, like do it at 80 degrees. I put a little bit too much in there. Pinch some out. Yeah, that'll be fine. Okay, now that I'm done with all those, if I had extra, and like in my original thing here, which you see is empty, I keep this jar, it's an 8-ounce jar, and I put the extra in there. And it's my discard jar, and I just keep it in the fridge, and when it's full, I make pancakes. So now my last step here is to just mix each of these up. So this one gets mixed, and this one's gonna get set on the counter for 24 hours so that I can repeat this whole process in the morning. So if you were only gonna make 1 loaf, you'd have some discard, or you could mix up less. You could do like 10 grams and 20 and 20, or even 5 and 10 and 10. You'd have to mess with it. Mix this one up. These 2 are gonna go, I have a bread proofer, like I said, it's set at 80 degrees. If you don't have a bread proofer, that's okay. You can put it in the oven with the oven light on, and that keeps it warm enough, because here I keep my house at 68 degrees in the winter, and it goes down to 65 at night, and that's a little cool for bread. It just takes longer. So I'm gonna stick it in the bread proofer for 6 hours, and it is about 8 o'clock, so about 2:15, I set a timer, and then, or an alarm, because otherwise I'll forget about it, and I'll come back and show you what we do after that. Okay, so now you can see it's puffy after the 6 hours. It's about 6 hours afterwards, and 2:15-ish. And I'm gonna put this on here, and I'm gonna zero it out. And again, my filtered water, I'm gonna add 310 grams of filtered water. So 310, and I can go a little bit faster, but then I'm kind of gonna slow down toward the end there, because if you put too much water, it's really hard to dump out the extra. Then I just take regular bread flour from Sam's Club. I'm gonna tear that out again. I do like bread flour, and I put 410 grams, so it's just white. 450, sorry, not 410. 450. I don't know how many cups it is. I like to measure these by grams. It's really simple, and I used to think it was a pain, but since I've learned how to bake this way, I really like doing it. So I'm gonna put the other one, and then I'll mix them both up and show you how to do that. So I'm gonna do the other one. I'm not gonna add my salt. I add my salt in about a half an hour. I'll come back and add the salt. Flour is easier if you overdo it. See, I can just scoop off the top. Okay, so now I can get rid of my scale, and I just use this. I And I like these plastic containers. I've used glass and I've used stainless steel, but what I find is that it sticks and that they're a lot harder to clean, and plastic is just easier to clean. So I bought these at the dollar store. I mean, it's simple. And so my dough doesn't have to be perfect. I think there's like a special whisk thing that you can do. I just haven't gotten it yet. You could do this with wet hands too. That's the other thing. You don't have to use this spatula. I just don't like getting my hands dirty and having to clean all the dough off of them. So it doesn't have to be perfect. I do try to get all the flour off the bottom though. And then I'll tell you too, when we do this, after this part, when we add the salt is when, if I'm gonna mix it throughout the dough, I mix it. Otherwise, I can talk you through how to add in other mix-ins, but maybe I'll make one of these into like a cinnamon raisin or something just to show you. So you have the two options of how I do mix-ins, and I'll write a blog post. So you can see that's mostly, we're not really kneading it. I just want to make sure that it's mixed. Okay. And then I will mix up the other one, and then I'm going to wait about a half an hour, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to add salt. Okay, so now we're going to add salt. So we get our bread on there, and you can see it's kind of starting to rise a little bit, and they call it autolace. Don't know much about it, but that helps it absorb the salt a little bit better. So I do 8 grams, which seems like a lot. I don't know what it equals, maybe a teaspoon. Okay, then I get my hand wet and I just kind of mix the dough, kind of twist it with my hand. And if there's any more of those spots like that have flour, kind of work those, because we don't want any pockets of flour. They'll be kind of hard. Okay, so once I do that, now I'm going to show you on the next one, we're going to add salt, but we're also going to add some chocolate chips. So let me do the salt, and then I just guesstimate. So you could do herbs and cheese I've done before. If you're going to do cinnamon raisin, I would add those in now. Any kind of mix-in that you want throughout the dough, you're going to put in now. Again, I'm going to get my hand wet, move the scale out of the way, and you're just going to kind of incorporate. The reason why you add the mix-ins now is because then about every half an hour to 45 minutes for the next 4 hours, actually 3.5 because we already let it sit, we're going to stretch and fold, and so it gives it a chance to really get it incorporated well instead of trying to mix it in at the end, because you are going to see that the dough starts to rise and puff. So we'll come back in about half an hour, 45 minutes, and I'll show you how to stretch and fold. Okay, so it's been more than 45 minutes. It's been an hour and 15 because I went to run an errand and got talking to someone. So here is the regular. We're going to stretch and fold. Again, my hand is wet. I got it wet in the sink before I started the video. And I just turn it. Notice that I turn it as I stretch and fold. And then put the lid. And then chocolate chip. You can see it's starting to get puffy. Again, stretch, fold. So I do about 3 of them. And sometimes it doesn't, it sticks, which is fine. And another 45 minutes. So now we're going to stretch and fold each one. So you can see it's starting to rise, and so I just pull and I stretch, fold it over, stretch, fold, and just do it like 3 or 4 times. And I got my hand wet first, so it doesn't stick. And I'll do the other one. This is the chocolate chip one, stretch and fold. But as you see, the chips will get more incorporated. So I just do it about 3 times and set it for another 45 minutes. Okay, so it's risen a little bit more. My hand is wet. And this time I did adhere to 45 minutes. So we're gonna set a timer for another 45 and we'll stretch and fold again. Okay, so now it's been about 4 hours. Sometimes I get another stretch and fold in there, but I had gone to the library, so I didn't. So I have these bread proofing baskets. You don't have to have them. You can use I've used a kitchen strainer before, I've used a metal bowl, but I get these big cloths. They were $1 at Target, and they're just like flour set cloths. And I'm getting my baskets ready. I'm gonna line them with my cloths. Okay. Then this is just regular all-purpose flour. I sprinkle some in there so that they won't stick. And it doesn't matter how much you put in there because you can always brush it off, although I'm lazy and never do. But you can even brush it off after it bakes, so it's not a big deal. Okay, so my baskets are prepped, and I'm gonna set them to the side. Here, okay? And then now I like these flexible cutting mats because I can rinse them easily. So I take a bunch of flour and I put it on the mat because the dough is going to be very sticky. It looks like we're gonna do plain sourdough first. So you can see how puffy it's gotten. I'm getting my hand wet so it doesn't stick. And I'm going to take it out of there. And then this, I'm gonna just soak my bowl in hot water. All right, and I'm gonna put some more on top, just a little bit. And now I'm just gonna start to kind of fold it over. And this is what they do for shaping. Okay, so like Bake with Jack does multiple shapings. I make bread all the time and I just don't have the patience to shape it a bunch. So I will keep adding little bits of flour onto the top as needed. But here I just I shape it into like a long loaf. And some people will let it sit and shape it again. But the whole idea is to kind of make it firm so it won't blob. And as these places come, sometimes I put more flour on them. Okay. So I'm just kind of folding it over, stretching it. I probably should have stopped sooner. Okay, so good enough. I'm gonna take it and I'm just gonna throw it in my basket. And this is how I do it. It's just that seam will go away. It's not gonna matter in the morning. And then I just cover it like this. And then I'm gonna put it in my refrigerator overnight until I'm ready to bake it in the morning. And then I'll go through that process. So here's another one. Get more flour on there. Okay, so if I were to if I have a mix-in that I'm gonna mix in, that's fine. If I wasn't doing a mix-in, like if I was gonna do cinnamon raisin, I would have mixed in the raisins already, and I would flatten this with my hand, and I would sprinkle my cinnamon, and then I would roll it. Same thing when I do cheese. I'll do cheese, black pepper, and that's another one I make, is cheese, parsley, and black pepper. And so when I do that one, I roll it up. So I like to do that sometimes too, but the chocolate chips are incorporated, so same thing. I'm just shaping this, and I shape them rather quickly. They hold their shape a little bit differently when there's mix-ins. Okay, so all I'm trying to do is get this kind of shape for the basket. And some of the chocolate chips fall out, but good enough. This basket's slightly smaller, that's why it looks like it takes up more room. I also have round ones. Again, cover it in the fridge overnight, and it'll be overnight for more than 12 hours.
For this next part, you're gonna have to pardon my appearance as it's like 5 minutes to 7 a.m. I like to bake my bread in this, but what I do is I put it in my oven. It's not quite the lowest rack. I mean, I could put it lower, but you know, it's gotta go low. And then I set my oven to 500 degrees. And I'm gonna let it heat up for a good hour. So probably I won't put the first loaf in until 8 o'clock.
Okay, so I'm gonna take my bread out of the fridge. It's about 8:15, and I'm going to unwrap it. And you'll see it's kind of, there's still a seam, but it's not gonna matter. I tend to reuse my parchment paper, so I'm gonna flip it onto this parchment paper. And there is, if I wanted to dust some of that off, I could, but I don't even worry about it. So this is the first step, so I'm gonna be able to lower it in, and I'm gonna need this lathe, and I'm gonna go over to the oven and show you my next step. Okay, so I'm gonna open my oven. I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do first. I'm gonna open my oven, and I'm gonna try to do this quickly. We overheat the oven because you're gonna lose some of the heat. I'm gonna put it to, put the bread in, score it, and then set it to 470 for 20 minutes. Then I'll come back and put it to 435 for 20 minutes, but I'll show you all that. So here we go. lower it in, and then I give it a nice score. And it should be enough that I could just slice it, but my blade is kind of dull. I should have just swapped it. Okay, so now I'm gonna bake at 470 for 20 minutes, and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so my bread timer just went off, so all I'm going to do is open it up, and hopefully you can see the spring. Maybe Hannah will zoom in, I don't know. You'll see it puffed. So I'm gonna put the lid off to the side, and then I'm gonna put it back in at 435 for 20 minutes, and then we'll show you the finished product. All right, so the timer went off, and I'm gonna show you it. I've used this parchment paper a lot, so it might break. As I lift it out, I'm gonna put it up here. Now, because I have a second loaf, I'm gonna stick the lid back on, and I'm gonna reset my oven for 500, and I'm gonna let it heat up for another good 20 to 30 minutes before I do my second loaf. Okay, so this must be the chocolate chip loaf. I didn't know a specific order. Somebody put the grapes on that one, so it's a little goofy, but that's okay. It rose, and all I'm gonna do is stick it on here. So I don't let them sit out. I take them straight from the fridge to there. And you notice that this one kind of held its shape better, but it's also a little crooked, but it'll all be okay. All right, so again, open up the oven, same process. Lower it in, score it, pretty deep. Sometimes I go back a second time just to make sure I got it. Lid on, 470 for 20 minutes. All right, ready to do the chocolate chip bread. So you can see, nice rise. And then 435 for 20 minutes. And so you know when bread comes out, it needs to sit about an hour before you cut it, at least. Okay, since this is my last loaf, I just turn off the oven, and I just take the whole pot out and then remove it. So I'll show it to you in a second here. This one gets darker because of the chocolate chips, so you can see. And we'll leave it for about an hour,